Let's reflect on the history and the legacy of the Parliament building. Joining us via Zoom is the head of architect at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, Mr. Lawrence. Thank you so much for your time. We really do appreciate it. I think let's just start off with how devastating it is to see the seat of democracy up in flames. We do understand that it's level 2 and 3 and it moved from the old assembly into the National Assembly. How devastating is it to see such a historic building up in flames?
Yes, good evening, Heidi, and to your viewers. Thank you for bringing me here. It is very devastating, as you've said. I mean, there's nothing as devastating or sorrowful for you to see a place which has so much history and legacy, especially in South Africa, to go up in such flames and to be gutted the way it is. It is devastating. There's no doubt about that. And even though it's a building, yes, a building does get burnt and it does get destroyed, and the contents of it, the documents and what was inside the building, the legacy still remains the same, because legacy can't be lost. I mean, the events that have happened in this building over the years, pre-apartheid, post-apartheid, and all the speeches and debates and notable events that have happened in this place, that legacy still stands. And buildings like this can be built and can be restored. It is a possibility, but yes, it is devastating to see such a building like this going in under such a destructive measure.
Yes, certainly. And as you mentioned, you know, it's a building that's up in flames, but the legacy remains. I just want to speak about the safety of our historic buildings, because this is not the first time a fire has broken out at Parliament. We know earlier last year there was a fire, but it was contained. And I want to speak about the measures that are being put in place. I know that you are the head of architecture at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, but just the importance of having measures in place in such historic buildings, because as you say, buildings can go up in flames, the legacy stays, but we also know that the Library of Parliament could also be in danger at this stage, and there are historic books in that library.
Yes, that's very true, Heidi. We cannot overstate the aspect of conserving and preserving our historical buildings. Especially this building is earmarked to be actually a heritage building, a national heritage building. And the issue about conserving buildings, especially buildings of this repute, is not an easy one, I must say, because these buildings and the contents that they have here, it takes a collaborative effort, and it's not just by government. We're talking private entities, we're talking professionals, we're talking people, volunteers, to try and see what measures can be put in place. I would. It also calls across different areas of industry and also technicalities and specialities, because it's not just about the architecture of the building. It talks about the mechanical things that need to be put in place to restore this building. It talks about also the specialities of technology, what you can use to keep this building safe and not for them to be destroyed in such a manner. So it's not an easy task, I would say, Heidi, but it can be done. But as I said, it's a collaborative effort. As I said, it's not just by government, or it involves even the common human being or the common citizen of the country. If I may add, I was opportune to go to Italy a couple of years back, and they do have a lot of historical buildings there and their cathedrals. And I found out that part of the people who do the restoration are also students, are also the citizens who volunteer their time to actually clean or to try and do something to restore the mechanisms that keep such buildings in place. So again, I reiterate that point that yes, it's important these things happen, but it's not an easy task. And it's something that many people need to come to the table to discuss and to see how we can preserve our buildings, especially our heritage buildings, moving forward. And not just the buildings, as you said, and also the contents and the documents thereof that these buildings accommodate and house.
Certainly, and I know that the Minister of Public Works, Patricia de Lille, says there should be no speculation, but given the fact that there was a fire that broke out early last year, many are saying that these buildings, for example, Parliament, there have been no upgrades and no services, and there has also been no security on premises because there's been no money to pay people over time. And the reason this is leading to the next question, to say that sometimes taxpayers say, well, we don't want to pay for upgrades. We don't want to pay for making sure that these buildings are maintained and kept up with. But surely, if you're seeing the seats of democracy up in flames, this should trigger something inside of you to say, perhaps, as taxpayers and government should overinvest in maintaining these buildings because of the history that it contains, and how devastating it would be should this fire be even more devastating.
Yes, you're correct, and I concur with that idea. It's very true that there needs to be more funding put into place. And as I just said, it brings also the aspect of patriotism, because, as I said, this is not just a government thing. Yes, government might have issues when it comes to funding, and I understand how that goes. And we, the taxpayers, saying we've done our own part, and that's just it. But it goes more than that, because you see, these buildings are symbols of our heritage. They're symbols of our nationality. The buildings are designed, they were reflective of a time which shows the ideologies and the philosophies of the past, and which is even being reflected even to today. If we mention and see what's happening in other countries, because things like this is not isolated to South Africa. I mean, we've had the Notre Dame, which got burnt in France, I think in 2019, and we've had other examples, even like the Buckingham Palace and the Windsor Palace also being burnt and destroyed, even up to the White House in America, which was also burnt down. So most of these buildings have been restored, but as I said before, we can't totally rely on government. It would be unfair on them. Yes, government does have a very strong part to play in making sure that these buildings are preserved. But as I said, it's a collective and collaborative effort, which is not just from government, from private sector, and as I said, to the citizens of the country, because these buildings represent us. These buildings are symbols of our nationality. So we need to protect them. We need to preserve them. As I said, they may just be buildings, but the legacies in them and the events that had happened in them needs to be preserved and conserved for the future generation of this country. So yes, I do agree with you that more should be done. Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate it. Thank you for your insights. That was the head of architects at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, Lawrence Ogunsanya.